if I'm just trying to keep all of this together in a sense that we're talking about teaming, we saw how Jesus filtered. We saw how Paul brought people along, how they equipped him, how they entrusted them. We have teaming circles. We have people at different levels that we're teaming with, but ultimately, we need to develop leaders, either outsiders or insiders, depending on the phase of work we're at. So there's just two simple tools that I want to share about a paradigm to help you think about leadership development. So I apologize if this is so small, but like when I print it, it's longer. But it's very, very simple. It's a very, very simple idea. Um, if you have seen the 5 levels or the 5 phases of movement, so basically it's the 4 fields, which is entry, gospel, believers, indigenous church. Leadership development means you're looking for, hey, when's the time that I exit and I entrust the work to them? Because we saw Paul do all of those things. Part of his leadership development was entrusting and encouraging people to do something on their own. So when we think of those 5 categories, those kind of become 5 columns. And so you think of, okay, where is this emerging leader at? And then you just ask 3 questions. What do they need to know? How should their heart be postured? What should they be doing? And then at the very bottom of this, it's kind of cut off a little bit, but you have the acrostic MAL, model, assist, watch, launch. So as we begin to develop what a person needs, and so let's just go through this for a few minutes as an exercise. Um, if someone's at phase 1, pre-entry and entry, what do they need to know?
Where is their UPG located in their city?
Yep. So you're going to have research related questions they need to know. What else do they need to know?
Some tools for like how to start a conversation with someone.
Yep. Entry tools, oikos, Luke 10, greetings, worldview of their people group. So you begin to see, and we don't have to think it comprehensively here, but begin to think about the things that they need to know. So that's the head. Then we move on to the heart. What should their heart posture be if they're taking on stewardship of a people group and they're at entry stage, right? So like they should love God and they should love people. That's just an example. They should exhibit humility. What should they be doing? Well, that could be like they're researching um, worldview, where they live, they're learning a tool, maybe they're language learning, maybe they're support raising. So then we fill this out for someone that we're trying to develop, and we're doing it with them and saying, okay, here's the things that I think you need to know for this phase. Here's the things that you need to be striving to be producing from your heart. Here's what you need to be doing. And then at the bottom, we have this acrostic MAL to remind us of, I'm not just telling them to do it, I'm following the method of Jesus and the method of Paul that I'm modeling, I'm taking them along with me. I'm showing them, I'm helping them, I'm watching them. And then I launch them for that competency. So then when we move on, okay, they've done all of that. And this really isn't enough lines to capture everything. This is just a tool to give you the paradigm. Then you move on to they're in phase 2. Daniel and Shelby, you're in phase 2, right?
Yeah, when you including got language learning, keeping us with our foot in phase 1.
Okay. So in phase 2, what I want everyone else to do is think through, what does Daniel and Shelby need to know?
They need to know how to share the gospel biblically and contextually.
Yep. Sorry, I'm going to try to zoom in on this. We also consider that gospel is not just them sharing the gospel, but they're equipping and mobilizing others. So think like they need to know a training package of how to train others to share the gospel. What should their heart posture be? That's different than pre-entry and entry, because this is like a building of a competency.
You should be sharing the gospel. What does Shelby say? Early and often.
Yeah, sharing the gospel early and often, training others, mobilizing others to share the gospel. And then again, at the very bottom, we have this reminder of, okay, I need to model sharing the gospel. I need to model training, sharing the gospel. I need to model an expectant heart. I need to model that I know a gospel tool. I need to model all of this. And then I begin to progress in, I'm passing the skill or competency off. I'm assisting them in sharing the gospel. I'm assisting them in training others. I'm watching and coaching. And then there becomes a point in time where I leave that competency. So like you have this idea of, okay, what do they need to know? What do they need to do? What does their heart posture need to be? So again, entrusting, encouraging. This is a good thing to think through. What does an outsider do when there's indigenous churches and they have indigenous leaders? What should we be doing as outsiders?
One thing that comes to mind is honestly like kind of protecting. So in a sense, like keeping maybe other outsider influences out, and like protecting like the emerging churches.
Yeah, it's a good perspective. Keeping it pure to the inside leadership, the direction they're going. So we think back to soils, really we're getting over here to the final two. What are we doing? We're helping reproducible process. We're developing leaders. We're starting to press people to look at the gaps. I think sometimes what ends up happening is you get over here to phase 4. You have one church, you have a couple churches. If the Westerner or the outsider didn't have to be a Westerner, if the outsider is still very active in forward-facing ministry, meaning they're out sharing the gospel, they're discipling a lot of believers, that's when we can actually become a barrier to what God's doing among those people. We are doing it because we feel good about it. We feel like we should be doing it. But this is just showing, like, again, our role changes with the phase of the work. And I think this is the area where sometimes whenever you think back 50, 70 years ago and just mission strategy, sometimes the term colonization goes along with mission strategy. I don't think anybody had ill intentions. It's just they stayed doing the same thing for too long, right? It wasn't they were doing bad things necessarily. I'm sure there were instances. They just weren't able to pivot and entrust and encourage others to take ownership. And so as it progresses, that's just a step we have to take. And then whenever you get to phase 5, entrust and encourage, and that's basically saying you're exiting out. So like phase 5 is less this far right one. And it just becomes that I'm not spending 100% of my time in this certain field. Maybe I'm only spending 50% of my time in this field, and I'm spending 50% of the time in another field, which means really I have very little direct ministry. But again, this is just, again, not to be prescriptive, but just to give you a paradigm to think through in developing leaders. This can apply to either insiders or outsiders. Is something that's totally secular, but I found it to be tremendously helpful in how I interact with people. And I don't always get it right, but I try. And it's called situational leadership, and it starts with this idea of you look, listen, and lead. Meaning you look at what someone's doing, you listen to what they're saying, and then you help lead them based off what they need. And the paradigm that presents this is this directive and supportive behavior. So I know that it's not a good image if I have to explain it. I get that, but I don't have any other image, so you have to bear with me. So on the bottom right is S1. You go up is S2, S3, S4. You have 2 axes. You have the directive behavior on the, I guess that would be the horizontal line. On the right side is your highly directive. The vertical line is your supportive behavior. The bottom is low, the top is high. So now let me just walk you through what this looks like. Well, Daniel and Shelby, we'll just use Austin as an example. So just everyone's kind of filled in. Austin is a guy that's onboarding on Daniel and Shelby's team. He's an American. At the beginning, he really has not developed a really high level of competency. And that's not his fault. That's just where he's at. It's not saying anything negative. So his developmental level is a D1. So in the beginning, our training and how we interact and developing and coaching is, if you look, S1 is highly directive, low supportive. Another way of looking at supportive is like encouragement. So when someone is just starting out, what they need me to do is they need me to be very direct and tell them what to do. What does that look like? Let me model a gospel tool. Let me assist you. Go share the gospel. And typically at the very beginning, people are operating with this level of I don't know what the word I'm looking for. It's not charisma, but they're very much going after it because they're excited. So the need to be supportive or encouraging, it's not that we don't want to be encouraging, but that's not where my energy's going. As they start to grow into a D2 developmental, they're kind of going up this bell curve, and now that it's more coaching, I'm less directive, but I'm more supportive and encouraging. Why? Because they've done it, they've fallen, they've been rejected, they need encouragement. Do you see how this is beginning to kind of progress? And then there becomes a point in time where I am less directive and less encouraging. Why? Because they're almost a peer. They're D3 developed. We're at this supporting stage where they don't need me to tell them what to do. But what they need is some encouragement. And then ultimately, as their skill set builds out, they're basically running kind of their own stream or network. I'm not telling them what to do, and I'm just really delegating to them and supporting. So when you think of situational leadership, you're trying to ask, okay, where is this person at? If they're brand new to your team and they have no experience, you can assume they're starting out, hey, I need to approach this conversation with this person with an S1 conversation. You can call it whatever you want, but you're being directive. As they continue to grow, how you interact with them is different. So again, this is just a paradigm to kind of give you a mindset of how I interact with different people should change based off their competency and their need. That's why it's called look, listen, lead. I need to look, what are they doing? They're doing nothing. I need to be highly directive. Okay, they're doing stuff, but they're complaining about the challenges. Look, listen, get it? I need to be more S2, S3. I need to be far more encouraging because they're having a lot of issue. Look, listen, they're doing a lot and they're not complaining. They're just thriving. Man, I need to interact with that person like S4. I just need to give them things. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, hey, I want to support you by giving you some more opportunities. So again, this is totally kind of a business model. It's actually developed by a believer, but it's predominantly implemented in the business world. Totally extra biblical, but I found it to be a helpful paradigm so that like whenever I look at an individual in a coaching relationship and I know they're sharing the gospel, they're making disciples, I don't need to be highly directive. I would actually stifle our relationship if I was highly directive. Most of the time when we think about leadership, we say that my leadership style is fill in the blank. That's a lazy form of leadership because leadership's not about you. It's about the people that you're trying to equip and develop. And so we have to shift our leadership style to their need. Now, do we all have our individual strengths? Like I've told the people that I coach that how do I word it? I'm low directive, high accountability, meaning I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I want to hold you accountable to what you say you're going to do. That's my style. I don't do good with S1 leadership, but I have to stretch myself when people need it, and I have to be highly directive. I really do best whenever we're in S2, S3, S4. But if I'm going to be a good leader, I have to learn how to operate in the areas I don't feel comfortable operating in. Does that make sense? Is this a helpful paradigm? And again, I feel like I'm maybe just kind of rambling on it now. You can read more about it if this is of interest. But